Silence can be louder than anger. A calm goodbye can leave a deeper mark than the biggest argument. This is the part of the empath's story that many people never see until it is too late. Most people believe an empath will always forgive. They believe kindness has no limits. They believe patience never runs out. Because empaths are caring, gentle, and willing to understand even the people who hurt them. They are often seen as emotionally unbreakable. But that belief is one of the biggest mistakes anyone can make. Every empath carries an invisible line. It is not easy to reach, and it is rarely crossed quickly. Yet once that line is crossed, everything changes. There is no dramatic scene. There is no desperate attempt to prove a point. There is no need for revenge. Instead, there is a quiet decision that happens deep inside. It is the moment an empath stops fighting for people who never fought for them. It is the moment they stop explaining, stop chasing, and stop believing that love alone can fix every broken relationship. By the time others realize what has happened, the connection they depended on has already disappeared. That is why so many people regret hurting an empath only after they are gone. They were never prepared for what comes next, because they misunderstood kindness from the very beginning. Today's video explores this powerful emotional transformation and reveals why it is so different from what most people expect. You will discover why empaths stay in painful situations much longer than others, why they keep giving chances when everyone else has already walked away, and what finally causes them to let go without looking back. We will uncover the hidden emotional patterns that shape an empath's decisions and explain why their silence is often misunderstood. You will also learn why people who took an empath for granted frequently experience regret long after the relationship has ended. It is not because the empath suddenly becomes cold or heartless. The real reason is much deeper, and it has everything to do with human psychology, emotional exhaustion, and the limits of compassion. As this video unfolds, you will see that the greatest change does not happen on the outside. It happens quietly inside the empath's mind, where years of patience slowly transform into wisdom, stronger boundaries, and a completely different way of seeing the people around them. Many never notice this change while it is happening because it does not come with loud warnings. It builds little by little through disappointment, broken trust, repeated excuses, and promises that never become reality. Each painful experience teaches a lesson, and every lesson moves the empath one step closer to a decision that cannot easily be reversed. One of the least understood truths about empaths is that they do not forgive because they enjoy being hurt. They forgive because they naturally search for reasons behind people's behavior. When someone becomes angry, distant, or unfair, the empath often wonders what pain that person might be carrying instead of immediately judging them. They see wounds where others see bad attitudes. They notice fear hidden behind harsh words. They recognize loneliness behind controlling behavior. This ability to understand emotions is one of their greatest strengths, but it can also become their greatest weakness when it causes them to ignore their own pain. Instead of asking whether someone deserves another chance, they often ask whether that person simply needs more time, more patience, or more understanding. Unfortunately, not everyone responds to kindness with gratitude. Some people mistake endless compassion for permission to continue the same harmful behavior. They begin expecting forgiveness instead of earning trust. They become comfortable receiving support without offering respect in return. Little by little, the relationship becomes unbalanced, and the empath carries more of the emotional weight than anyone realizes. Another fact that surprises many people is that empaths rarely reach their breaking point because of one single event. It is usually the result of countless small moments that slowly collect over time. A broken promise here, a careless comment there, another apology without real change, another sacrifice that goes unnoticed, another night spent worrying about someone who never worries about them in return. None of these moments seem large on their own, but together they become impossible to ignore. This is why outsiders are often shocked when an empath finally walks away. They only notice the ending, not the long journey that led there. They see one quiet decision without seeing the hundreds of silent disappointments that came before it. The empath has been fighting for the relationship long before anyone else realized there was a problem. By the time they stop trying, they have usually spent months or even years hoping things would become different. That hidden emotional journey is one of the biggest reasons their final decision is so difficult to reverse. Throughout this video, we will explore every stage of that journey. We will look at why empaths naturally attract people who rely heavily on their kindness, why emotional exhaustion often arrives without warning, and why setting healthy boundaries changes an empath more than any argument ever could. You will also discover why the people who hurt an empath often begin to recognize their true value only after they have lost access to the love, support, and understanding they once took for granted. The answers are more surprising than they first appear, because this story is not really about revenge. It is about transformation. It is about the quiet strength that develops when someone finally realizes that protecting their own peace is just as important as protecting everyone else's feelings. By the end of this video, you will understand why the greatest power an empath possesses is not endless forgiveness. It is knowing exactly when forgiveness should no longer come at the cost of their own well-being. If you enjoy exploring the hidden side of psychology, emotional intelligence, relationships, and the deeper patterns behind human behavior, then you are in the right place. Welcome to the channel. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our upcoming videos, because each one uncovers powerful insights that can completely change the way you understand yourself and the people around you. Now, with that in mind, let's begin where every empath's story truly starts, because before we reach the moment they finally let go, we first need to understand why they stay far longer than almost anyone else ever would. One of the biggest reasons empaths stay in painful relationships is that they see people differently from everyone else. While most people judge others by repeated actions, an empath often looks beyond those actions and focuses on what a person could become. They notice kindness hidden beneath anger. They see fear behind arrogance. They recognize childhood wounds behind emotional distance. Instead of asking whether someone's behavior is healthy, they ask what might have caused that behavior in the first place. This ability allows them to understand people on a very deep level, but it also makes them vulnerable to disappointment. They hold on to potential long after reality has made its message clear. They believe that enough patience, enough love, and enough understanding can help someone become the person they were always meant to be. Unfortunately, potential is only a possibility. Behavior is what people actually live with every single day. An empath may spend months hoping for the future, while quietly accepting the pain of the present. They tell themselves that everyone deserves another chance because people are capable of change. In many cases, that belief comes from their own life experiences. They know they have made mistakes. They know they have grown through pain. Because they changed, they naturally believe others can do the same. That belief is beautiful, but it can also become dangerous when it is given to someone who has no real desire to grow. This is why empaths often remain in situations that other people would leave much sooner. Every apology sounds sincere because they want to believe it is sincere. Every promise feels like the beginning of a new chapter because hope is one of the strongest parts of their personality. They become emotionally invested in the possibility of change instead of the evidence in front of them. Days become months. Months become years. The same patterns continue, but the empath keeps telling themselves that tomorrow might finally be different. They wait for actions to match words. They wait for respect to replace excuses. They wait for honesty to replace manipulation. Sometimes that change never comes. Yet the empath continues giving another opportunity, because giving up on someone feels like giving up on hope itself. Another reason empaths give too many chances is that they instinctively look inward before looking outward. When conflict appears, their first question is often, "What did I do wrong?" Instead of immediately recognizing unhealthy behavior from another person, they search for mistakes within themselves. They replay conversations over and over. They wonder whether they spoke too harshly, expected too much, or misunderstood someone's intentions. This habit comes from their strong sense of empathy. They genuinely care about how other people feel, so they naturally question whether they contributed to the problem. Self-reflection is healthy when it leads to personal growth, but constant self-blame slowly erodes confidence. It becomes easy for emotionally unhealthy people to shift responsibility because the empath is already carrying more guilt than belongs to them. Before long, they begin apologizing for things that were never their fault. They accept blame simply to restore peace, believing harmony is more important than proving who was right. Conflict itself is something many empaths try to avoid whenever possible. They understand how painful arguments can be because they feel emotional tension very deeply. Even a simple disagreement can stay with them long after everyone else has moved on. Rather than escalating a situation, they often choose silence. They swallow their disappointment. They hide their frustration. They convince themselves that staying quiet is the kindest option. While this may create temporary peace, it often creates long-term suffering. Every unspoken feeling becomes another emotional weight they carry alone. Every ignored boundary teaches the other person that crossing it has no real consequence. Over time, silence is mistaken for acceptance. Patience is mistaken for permission. Compassion is mistaken for weakness. This is exactly where manipulators, selfish individuals, and emotionally immature people begin to feel comfortable. They rarely ignore boundaries all at once. Instead, they test them slowly. They ask for one small favor that becomes another. They make one disrespectful comment and face no resistance. They break one promise and receive immediate forgiveness. They notice that the empath continues to stay no matter what happens. Each time there are no consequences, their confidence grows. Without even realizing it, the empath teaches them that kindness will always outweigh accountability. The unhealthy person begins expecting emotional support without offering the same care in return. They take more than they give. They demand understanding while refusing responsibility. They become accustomed to receiving endless patience because they have never experienced the possibility of losing it. This process happens so gradually that many empaths do not recognize it until they are emotionally exhausted. There is rarely one dramatic event that changes everything overnight. Instead, it is a slow accumulation of disappointments. Every ignored feeling leaves a small crack in the foundation of trust. Every broken promise weakens hope a little more. Every moment of emotional neglect quietly drains energy from someone who keeps giving without asking for much in return. From the outside, everything may appear normal. Friends and family may even believe the relationship is healthy, because the empath continues smiling, continues helping, and continues showing kindness. What nobody sees is the silent emotional work happening beneath the surface. Every day requires more effort than the day before. Every conversation feels heavier. Every disappointment lingers longer. The empath is no longer carrying only their own emotions. They are carrying the emotional weight of the entire relationship. Eventually, something begins to change, but almost nobody notices it at first, because it does not look dramatic. There is no explosive argument. There is no emotional breakdown. The greatest shift happens quietly inside. Hope begins losing its strength. Optimism slowly gives way to exhaustion. The empath no longer wakes up believing that one more conversation will fix everything. Instead, they begin feeling emotionally tired before the conversation even starts. They still care, but caring feels heavier than it once did. They still love, but love now comes with constant disappointment. The emotional energy that once seemed endless starts running out. This is the breaking point that most people completely miss. They assume nothing has changed because the empath is still present. They do not realize that emotional distance often begins long before physical distance ever does. As this exhaustion grows, the empath becomes quieter. They stop explaining every feeling because they have already explained it many times before. They stop defending themselves because they know their words are no longer creating change. They stop chasing after people who continue walking away emotionally. They stop trying to repair relationships that only one person is trying to save. Their silence feels different now. It is no longer filled with hope. It is filled with acceptance. They begin accepting that some people simply do not want the kind of relationship they have been trying to build. Others mistake this silence as another temporary mood. They assume the empath will soon return to their old habits of forgiving, fixing, and sacrificing. They believe everything will eventually return to normal, but it never does, because something much deeper has already changed. Inside the empath's mind, a quiet realization has finally taken root. They understand that love cannot force another person to develop respect. They understand that kindness cannot heal someone who refuses to face their own behavior. They understand that sacrifice cannot rescue every relationship, especially when only one person is making sacrifices. Most importantly, they discover that peace has greater value than constant emotional struggle. This realization is not born from bitterness. It is born from experience. It comes after countless attempts to save relationships that could only survive if both people were willing to grow. For the first time, the empath begins protecting their own emotional well-being with the same dedication they once reserved for everyone else. Boundaries no longer feel selfish. They feel necessary. Saying no longer creates overwhelming guilt. It creates relief. Walking away no longer feels like failure. It feels like choosing a healthier future. That inner transformation changes everything. The empath no longer feels responsible for fixing every broken person who enters their life. They understand that healing is a personal choice that cannot be forced through love alone. They become more careful about where they invest their emotional energy. They pay closer attention to consistent actions instead of beautiful words. They notice patterns much earlier than before. They recognize manipulation before becoming trapped inside it. They stop confusing emotional intensity with genuine connection. Slowly, they become more confident in trusting their instincts instead of ignoring them for the comfort of others. Ironically, this is often the exact moment when the other person finally begins paying attention. The endless support they once expected without question is no longer available. The patient listener who always understood their struggles is suddenly quiet. The person who constantly forgave no longer rushes back after every disappointment. The emotional safety they depended on begins slipping away. At first, they may think it is temporary. They assume the empath simply needs time. Then they realize the warmth they once took for granted is no longer being offered so freely. They begin missing the encouragement, the loyalty, the understanding, and the unconditional support that had become such a normal part of their life. Only after that steady presence disappears do they recognize how much it truly meant. They discover that finding someone who listens without judgment, believes in them during difficult seasons, stays loyal through hardship, and loves without keeping score is far rarer than they ever realized. While they struggle to understand what they have lost, the greatest transformation is happening somewhere else entirely. The empath is no longer measuring their worth by how much they can endure. They become stronger without becoming harder. They become wiser without becoming colder. Confidence quietly replaces constant self-doubt. Healthy boundaries replace endless sacrifice. Emotional balance replaces emotional survival. They stop fearing rejection because they have learned that losing an unhealthy relationship is often the first step toward finding a healthier one. They become far more selective about who is allowed into their inner world because they now understand that access to their kindness must be earned through mutual respect, honesty, and consistent care. Instead of trying to rescue everyone they meet, they begin building relationships where support flows in both directions, where love is shared instead of demanded, and where compassion exists alongside accountability. And this leads to the final lesson. The most important lesson to take away from this discussion is that hurting an empath does not automatically lead to regret because of karma, destiny, or some mysterious force. Life does not always work that way. The real regret usually comes from something much more human. It comes when someone finally realizes that genuine care is incredibly rare. It is easy to overlook the person who always listens, always understands, always forgives, and always stays. Those qualities become so familiar that they begin to feel ordinary. But once they are gone, their true value becomes impossible to ignore. By then, apologies may come too late, and promises may no longer have the power they once did. Not because the empath wants revenge, but because they have finally learned a lesson that changed their life forever. The empath does not walk away feeling victorious. They are not trying to punish anyone or prove a point. In fact, many empaths leave with sadness rather than anger. They remember the good moments. They remember the hopes they once had. They remember the future they believed was possible. But they also understand that love without respect slowly becomes emotional exhaustion. Caring for someone should never require abandoning yourself. Forgiveness should never become permission for repeated hurt. Compassion should never mean accepting behavior that slowly destroys your peace of mind. The greatest victory in empath experiences is not watching someone regret losing them. It is finally reaching a place where they no longer lose themselves while trying to save everyone else. That is the transformation many people never expect. The empath who once feared disappointing others begins choosing honesty over people-pleasing. The empath who once carried everyone's emotional burdens begins protecting their own energy. The empath who once believed every relationship could be saved finally accepts that some relationships are only meant to teach lessons. This is not becoming cold. It is becoming emotionally healthy. It is understanding that real love can only survive where there is mutual respect, trust, accountability, and genuine effort from both sides. So if there is one message to remember, let it be this. Kindness is not weakness. Patience is not unlimited. Respect will always matter more than empty promises. Healthy boundaries do not destroy love. They protect it. And the greatest transformation happens when an empath finally chooses peace instead of constantly fighting battles that were never theirs to win. Sometimes walking away is not giving up on another person. Sometimes it is finally choosing yourself after spending far too long choosing everyone else. Sometimes the greatest loss is not the relationship itself. It is realizing far too late that the one person who truly cared has finally learned to care for themselves. Now we'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think is the biggest mistake people make when they take an empath for granted? Share your answer in the comments below. Your perspective could help someone else who is going through a similar experience. If you found this video meaningful and valuable, please take a moment to give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. And if you're passionate about psychology, emotional intelligence, relationships, and discovering the hidden patterns behind human behavior, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our future videos. Thank you for watching, thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next video.